Racist woman asks black man to leave his own house and calls 911. What happens next is unbelievable. He was watering his plants in his own front yard, keys in his pocket, mortgage in his name. But to her, he didn't look like he belonged. So she marched up, phone in hand, and said the words that would spark a firestorm. "You need to leave, I'm calling the police." What followed wasn't just another 911 call. It became a national headline, a confrontation that flipped the script in a way no one, especially her, was prepared for. Because when the police arrived and the truth came out, what happened next was something she never expected and something he will never forget. Stay with us, because this isn't just a story about ignorance. It's about what happens when racism meets reality and loses. Imagine building a treehouse in your own backyard and the cops show up because your new neighbor thinks you don't belong there. You ever have one of those days where things are finally starting to go right? That was Dorian Bell's Saturday. He had his gloves tossed in the passenger seat, a receipt from Thompson's Hardware, and Fort Smith still stuck to the dash, and a back seat full of wood for the treehouse he'd promised his kids 2 summers ago. His wife Amira was inside prepping lunch. The weather perfect. Clear skies, warm air, the kind that makes your plans feel possible. He pulled into his driveway on Brady Street just past the bend by the old elementary school. It was a quiet stretch of road in Van Buren, Arkansas, with single-story homes and neighbors who waved when they passed each other. Dorian liked that. He liked keeping his head down, taking care of his family, and minding his business. He stepped out in boots, jeans smudged with sawdust, a gray hoodie zipped up halfway. Nothing fancy, just the usual weekend wear. He didn't even notice her at first. Across the street, half hidden behind a hedge of dying aylas, stood a woman, arms folded, chin slightly raised, staring. Dorian glanced over, gave her a polite nod. She didn't nod back. He figured, okay, maybe she's new. Not everybody's friendly right away. Whatever. He hoisted a couple planks of wood over his shoulder and made his way to the backyard gate. "Excuse me." Her voice was sharp, clipped, like she was used to being obeyed. Dorian turned. "Yeah." She crossed the street with a fast, pointed walk. "What are you doing over there?" He blinked. "Pardon. This house." "Who are you working for?" "Because I am the owner." He interrupted gently, trying not to sound annoyed. "My name is Dorian Bell. I live here." She stared at him as if that didn't compute. That can't be right. Dorian let out a short breath. "Ma'am, I live here with my wife and 2 kids. Been here going on 6 years. Her eyes narrowed. No. I've walked this neighborhood almost every evening since I moved here. I know who lives where. "Well, I've been walking my own lawn since 2018, he said, forcing a bit of a smile. "Maybe you just missed me." She didn't smile back. Instead, she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." Dorian laughed, confused, uncomfortable. "You're joking, right?" "No, I'm not," she said, turning slightly to shield the screen from view. "There's a suspicious individual trespassing. He says he owns the house, but I don't believe that's true." "Suspicious." Dorian echoed, his tone flattening. "My name is Ruth Ann Perry," she said like it meant something. "And I'm not afraid to act when something seems wrong." He looked at her, then looked toward the front window where his daughter Jessa stood watching. Just a silhouette with her small hand pressed to the glass. Dorian walked a few steps closer to Ruth Ann, calm but firm. "You need to hang up the phone." She flinched slightly but kept talking. 911. "Yes, I'd like to report a possible break-in. A man in a hoodie is unloading things into a backyard." "No, I don't believe he lives here." The last part hit hard. And the crazy part, Dorian had heard stories like this before, but he never thought he'd be the story. Not here, not in this house, not while his own kids were watching. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a mirror. He answered quickly, keeping his eyes on Ruth Ann. "You okay out there?" she asked. "Yeah," he muttered. "Just a neighbor being curious." but Amamir could hear it in his voice. "I'm coming out." "No. Stay inside with the kids." Dorian ended the call and leaned against the tailgate of his truck, waiting. Not running, not yelling, just waiting. But what neither of them expected was how fast those sirens would show up and what the officers would do next. The first cruiser rolled up less than 5 minutes later, lights flashing, no siren. A second car pulled up behind it, then a third. Dorian stayed right where he was by the truck arms, folded expression, unreadable. Ruth Ann stood off to the side, phone still in hand, lips moving like she was giving directions. The door of the lead cruiser opened and out stepped Officer Neil Alvarez, early 40s, stocky build, calm eyes behind aviator sunglasses. He scanned the scene. A man standing calmly by his vehicle, a woman waving her arms like she was directing traffic at a parade. Alvarez approached, hand resting near his belt, but not on his weapon. "You the one who made the call, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes, that man is trying to get into the house over there." Alvarez turned to Dorian. "Sir, can I speak with you for a moment?" Dorian nodded once. "Sure." As Alvarez stepped closer, the second cruiser's door opened. Out came Officer Latrice Donnelly, tall black with a straight posture that said she didn't miss much. Her eyes locked on Dorian, and a flicker of recognition passed across her face. "Dorian Bell?" she asked. He turned toward her, surprised. "Yeah, we met at the city council cleanup thing last fall, right?" She nodded. "That's right. Backyard composting seminar." Ruth Ann's face fell. "Wait." What? Officer Alvarez raised a brow, then turned to Ruth Ann. "Ma'am, can you explain again what made you believe he didn't live here?" "He said he owned the house, but I've been walking this neighborhood and I know who belongs here." "He doesn't." "He does." Officer Donnelly cut in. "I've met his family." Ruth Ann's mouth opened, then closed again. Alvarez looked back at Dorian. "Mind if I see some ID just to log the contact?" "No problem," Dorian said, pulling out his wallet. "You want the license or the electric bill, too?" "Names on both." They all shared a dry chuckle. Even Donnelly cracked a smile. But Ruth Ann wasn't done. "You're just going to take his word for it?" "No, ma'am," Alvarez replied, flipping open Dorian's ID. "We're taking the word of a legal document issued by the Arkansas Department of Finance." Dorian handed over his driver's license and then nodded toward the mailbox where the Bell family was painted across a wooden sign his kids had made. Bright blue letters, slightly uneven. Ruth Ann's eyes darted to it like she was seeing it for the first time. Donnelly walked over to the porch and peered in through the screen door. Amira was standing just inside, holding their toddler. She gave a small wave. Donnelly waved back, then turned to Ruth Ann. "You're new to the area, right? Last month," she muttered. Donnelly gave a slow nod. "Maybe next time. Just ask questions before you call 911, especially when it comes to your neighbors. People live here. They raise kids here. They work hard to feel safe at home." "I just thought—" "I know what you thought," Donnelly said quietly. "That's the problem." There was a pause. Everyone could feel it. Officer Alvarez handed Dorian back his ID. "Sorry for the inconvenience, sir." Dorian took it. "Appreciate how you handled it." He wasn't angry, not visibly, but his tone heavy. The kind of heavy that builds after carrying the same story too many times. Ruth Ann stood motionless. No more protests, no more accusations, just a woman realizing she might have made a very public mistake. But what happened next would take things from awkward to unforgettable. Because it wasn't just the officers who saw everything. Someone else had been filming from across the street. From behind a curtain on the other side of Brady Street, Edgar Linwood, a retired history teacher with a thing for camcorders, had caught the whole thing. He'd been watching out his window when the police cars rolled up, phone in hand, already recording. At first he thought it might be a break-in too, until he saw who it was. Edgar and Dorian weren't close, but they'd nodded hellos, swapped lawn tips once or twice enough for Edgar to know something didn't sit right. And now the whole scene was captured on a shaky but clear video. Ruth Ann pointing the officers, talking Dorian standing there with that look. The one where dignity sits on top of frustration like a paper we. Edgar didn't post it right away. He wasn't that guy, but he sent it to his son who taught middle school in Fayetteville. The son posted it on a local community page with a simple caption. "This is Dorian Bell. He lives here. Watch what happens when someone assumes he doesn't." It spread faster than wildfire. By Sunday morning, the post had over 20,000 shares. People started showing up on the page from all over Arkansas and beyond, dropping comments angry, sympathetic, shocked. But back on Brady Street, Dorian had no idea any of this was happening. He spent the rest of his Saturday inside cutting strawberries for his daughter's lunch and doing his best not to let the earlier incident leak into the rest of his day. But it wasn't easy. Later that night, he sat with a mirror on the back patio, their feet resting on the low brick wall he'd built last summer. She passed him a cup of chamomile tea. "You want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Okay." There was a pause. Then he said, "I kept thinking about Jessa. She saw it. You know me and that woman, then the cops. She asked if you were in trouble." Amamira murmured. He stared out at the yard. "That's what gets me. Not what the woman said. Not even the police. Just my daughter saw it. And now it's part of her memory." At 5 years old, Amamira leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat like that for a while, letting the sounds of the neighborhood at night cover what they didn't say out loud. Meanwhile, down the block, Ruth Ann sat in her kitchen, the phone glowing with texts she wasn't answering. Her cousin had sent her the video, then her old co-worker, then her sister-in-law in Texas. Each message said roughly the same thing. "You might want to see this. What were you thinking?" "Seriously?" Ruth Ann. She didn't press play at first. Couldn't. Instead, she stared out the window at the Bell's house. Porch light on calm, alive, full. Then slowly, she clicked the video. She watched herself, her face, her tone, her words. Watched the officers keep calm. Watched Donnelly speak gently but firmly. Watched Dorian stand there saying nothing wrong, doing nothing wrong. And something cracked in her chest. Not enough to change everything overnight, but enough to let something uncomfortable in. She got up, walked to the fridge, poured herself a glass of wine, and sat back down in silence. But by Monday morning, the video wasn't just trending. It had caught the attention of the mayor's office, a local news anchor, and someone from Dorian's own job who wanted to talk about using the moment. By Monday, everyone at Dorian's office had seen the video. He walked into the conference room that morning for a budget review meeting only to find heads turning, eyes softening. Some nodded with that awkward mix of respect and pity. A few avoided eye contact altogether. His manager, Renee Whitfield, a direct and thoughtful woman in her early 50s, called him into her office before the 10:00 a.m. sync-up. She shut the door gently. "Dorian, you okay?" He gave a small shrug. "I'm here. That's something." She leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I do want to say you handled yourself with more composure than I think most people would have." He gave a tight smile. Wasn't much of a choice. "My daughter was watching." Renee hesitated, then said, "The mayor's office reached out. They want to feature the footage in a community forum they're organizing on neighborhood trust and race relations. Would you be open to speaking?" He stared at her. A moment passed. "You want me to be the face of the incident?" She didn't deny it. "I want you to own your side of it if that's something you feel right doing. This video, Dorian, it's already part of the public conversation. You didn't ask for it, but maybe there's power in showing people what grace looks like." He leaned back in the chair, hands folded across his stomach. "I'll think about it." Later that evening, after dinner and bedtime stories, he pulled out his phone. Dozens of messages, strangers reaching out some kind, some raw, a few trying to explain what Ruth Ann must have felt. One stood out. It was from Edgar Linwood, the neighbor who recorded the video. Just a short note. Didn't know this would blow up. Just thought it might make people pause before assuming things. Hope you're all right. If you ever need a second hand on the treehouse, I'm retired and bored. Dorian smiled for the first time that day. That same night across the street, Ruth Ann sat in her living room surrounded by unopened mail. Her doorbell had rung twice already. One person left a printed article from a social justice nonprofit. Another left a hands-scrolled note that simply read, "Think before you call." She felt like the entire town had her name in their mouths. Still, she hadn't apologized. Not publicly, not to Dorian. But guilt doesn't just sit quietly. It loops things over and over in your head like bad audio. You hear yourself again. Your voice, the words, you can't escape it. Around 9:00 p.m., she sat down and began to write something on a yellow legal pad. Then she crumpled it up, started over, crumpled it again. Eventually, she stopped trying to write and just walked outside. Across the street, Dorian was still on the porch. Jessa had fallen asleep in his lap. A fleece blanket wrapped around both of them. He saw Ruth Ann standing by her mailbox. Their eyes met. She opened her mouth like she might say something, then didn't just give the smallest nod. Dorian didn't nod back. Not yet. But that wouldn't be the last time they'd meet face to face. And the next time, everything would be different. By the middle of the week, Brady Street didn't feel the same. People were suddenly friendlier, but in that awkward, overcompensating kind of way. Neighbors who had never said more than a wave now crossed the street to ask how Dorian was doing. A man from 3 blocks over offered to donate lumber for the treehouse. The local bakery left muffins on their porch with a sticky note that read, "We see you." Dorian appreciated the gestures, sort of. But it also felt like people weren't reacting to him. They were reacting to the version of him in the video. The quiet black man who didn't raise his voice when he had every reason to. The man who stood calmly while someone else's fear tried to define him. "I'm not a saint," he told Air one morning, sipping his coffee. "No one said you are. They're acting like I should be proud I didn't snap." But what if I had? What if I raised my voice even slightly? That woman said suspicious and 3 squad cars showed up. What if I'd been angry? Amamira nodded slowly. Then this would have been a different kind of video. He looked down into his mug. That's what scares me. Meanwhile, Ruth Ann kept to herself. Her once daily walks stopped. Her porch lights stayed off. She went out only when she had to late in the evening or early in the morning. People whispered when she passed them at the pharmacy, at the post office, even church. But the shame that followed her was different from the fear that had driven her. She watched the video again and again, trying to understand what exactly she'd been reacting to that day, why her gut had told her something was wrong the second she saw a man in a hoodie carrying wood. And every time she thought she had a reason, it sounded weaker. Then the letter arrived. Not from Dorian, from her sister Monica back in Missouri. It read, "You were wrong, Ruth Ann. You know it. You raised me better than that. I remember you yelling at a clerk in 1996 for following a black teenager around a music store. What changed? Are you lonely? Are you scared? Are you angry at someone else because whatever it is, you owe that man and his family a real apology?" Face to face. Not a note, not a statement. A moment where you look him in the eye and take responsibility. Ruth Ann folded the letter slowly, then sat in her quiet living room for a long time with the envelope still in her hands. Across the street, Dorian stood in the backyard holding a power drill and a fresh 2x4. Jessa bounced nearby in a pink tutu and rain boots, pretending the backyard was a castle. Amira called out from the kitchen window to remind him to take a break. He smiled for the first time in days. Then his phone buzzed again. Another text. This time from someone he hadn't heard from in years. An old college friend. It read, "Saw the video. Proud of how you handled it. Wish more of us had that kind of self-control." Dorian sighed. He didn't want to be known for holding back. He wanted to be known for building something for his kids, for his family, for his peace. But that peace was about to be interrupted one last time because Ruth Ann was finally ready to walk across the street. It was a Thursday afternoon. Dorian had just finished screwing the final plank into the treehouse platform, sweat on his brow, drill and hand music playing low from a speaker on the porch. Jessa was inside watching a cartoon, and for the first time all week things felt normal again. Then he heard footsteps on the gravel. He turned. There she was, Ruth Ann, standing at the edge of his driveway holding something in both hands. Her mouth was tight, her eyes unsure. She looked like someone walking into a courtroom they weren't sure they belonged in. Dorian stood up slowly, brushing sawdust off his jeans. "You need something?" he asked, tone even. She nodded once. "Just a few minutes of your time." He didn't answer right away. Amira had seen her from the kitchen. She opened the window slightly. "You okay, Dee?" He looked back at her, then gave the smallest nod. "Yeah, I got it." He walked down to meet Ruth Ann halfway, arms crossed, not defensive but guarded. She handed him the envelope. "It's something I wrote, but I don't want you to just read it. I wanted to say it, too." Dorian didn't take the envelope yet. "Go ahead," he said quietly. She swallowed hard. "What I did last weekend was wrong. I didn't ask. I didn't think. I just assumed. And what I assumed says more about me than anything else." He said nothing. She continued, "I've been embarrassed, angry at myself, but also trying to understand where that instinct came from, because if I don't figure that out, then I'll just do it again to someone else. And I don't want to be that kind of person." The wind shifted the trees, rustled a car passed by. She kept going. "I know it's not your job to make me feel better or to forgive me, but I needed to say it to your face." Finally, Dorian spoke. "You know what hurt most." She looked at him. "My daughter. She saw it all. She still talks about it." She said, "Why did that lady think you didn't live here?" I had to explain to her something I wish I never had to. Ruth Ann blinked quickly. "I'm sorry." He looked down, hands on his hips. "I've had this house 6 years, paid every mortgage, mowed every inch of this lawn. Fixed the plumbing, painted the garage, built that treehouse from scratch. And one afternoon, none of that mattered. You looked at me and saw something you were afraid of." She nodded. "I did." They stood there a moment longer, the silence heavy but not sharp anymore. He finally took the envelope. "I'll read it later." "Thank you," she said. As she turned to leave, Dorian called out, "Hey!" She stopped. "You still walk the neighborhood?" "Not lately. Maybe you should start again." Ruth Ann blinked. "You sure you want to see me walking past your house?" He gave a dry half-smile. "Better that than hiding behind curtains." She nodded slowly. "All right." He didn't say goodbye. He just went back to the backyard, to the unfinished ladder to the treehouse, waiting for the final railings. Inside the envelope later that night, Amamira read the letter first, then passed it to Dorian. It was handwritten, full of crossed-out words, messy margins, honest, painful, and without excuse. "She's trying," Amamira said. Dorian nodded. It's a start, but what came next wasn't just about Ruth Ann or Dorian. It was about a whole street that had to figure out what kind of community it wanted to be, starting with a block party no one expected. 2 weeks later, a flyer showed up in every mailbox on Brady Street. It wasn't fancy, just white paper, black ink taped at the corners with cheap blue masking tape. Neighborhood cookout. Saturday, 4 p.m. Everyone welcome. Let's talk. Let's eat. Let's do better. No one signed it, but everyone knew who it came from. That Saturday, a fold-out table appeared on the Bell family's lawn, then a cooler full of sodas, then a grill borrowed from a neighbor 3 doors down, and then people, families, couples, teenagers on bikes, retirees, and sun hats. Some came carrying pies or potato salad. Others just brought folding chairs and uncertain smiles. Dorian stood near the grill flipping burgers. Amamira handed out lemonade. Jessa ran through the grass with a jump rope and a face full of blue ice pop. It was weird at first, not tense, just quiet. Then Edgar Linwood showed up with a stack of paper plates and started telling a story about the time a goose chased him during a field trip in 1982. The whole group laughed hard. The ice cracked. Then Ruth Ann came. She brought cornbread and napkins, and this time she didn't hang back. She sat next to Amir, who offered her a drink, and asked how her week had been. They talked slowly, carefully, but they talked. Later in the evening, someone brought out a portable speaker and played old Motown songs. Kids danced barefoot in the grass. Adults clapped along. And for a moment, just a small one, people stopped seeing each other as categories. They just saw each other. Dorian stood with Donnelly and Alvarez both off-duty, sipping cold drinks and watching the street. "Looks different than last time we were here," Alvarez said. "Yeah," Dorian said. "Feels different, too." Donnie added, "Not perfect, but better." Dorian nodded. "That's enough for now." Then someone handed him the mic, just a Bluetooth speaker hooked to a phone, but they wanted him to say something because this all started with him, whether he liked it or not. He looked out at the crowd. "I didn't ask for any of this," he began, voice steady, "and I definitely didn't want to be a symbol of anything. I just wanted to build a tree house and spend time with my family." People chuckled softly. But when that moment happened, I realized something. We all have a role in what kind of place this is. Not just this block, but this country. And our choices, our assumptions, our silence, our courage shape that more than we know. He paused. No one moved. I'm not mad anymore. I'm tired. Tired of having to prove I belong. Tired of having to smile through things that hurt. But I'm not hopeless. Because look around this tonight. This is what fixing it looks like. It's not fast, it's not clean, but it's honest and it matters. Applause followed. Not loud, not performative, just real. That night the cookout lasted until the stars showed up. Someone turned on porch lights. Someone else brought out firewood. A few teenagers made s'mores over a portable fire pit. And when it was time to clean up, people didn't scatter. They stayed. They picked up plates, folded chairs, helped carry things to cars. And Ruth Ann, she didn't hide. She stayed until the last bag of trash was tied up. As she left, she turned to Dorian. "I still have work to do," she said. "So do all of us," he replied. And that was it. No grand speech, no press release, just people trying day by day to do better than the day before. Because belonging doesn't come from a welcome sign or a handshake. It comes from being seen, heard, respected, and from having the courage to stand up even when you're standing alone. If this story made you feel something, if it made you think, share it. Talk about it. Don't let it fade. Stories like Dorian's happen more often than we want to admit. But change starts with conversations like these. So be that conversation. Be that change. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply stood on his own porch with the truth in his pocket and dignity in his silence. Because sometimes the most powerful response to hate is being unshakably, unapologetically present. The police didn't arrest him. They didn't remove him. They shook his hand. And in that moment, the woman who tried to erase him was the one who disappeared. This story isn't just about racial profiling. It's about how far we still have to go and how powerful it is to stand your ground when the world tries to tell you you don't belong. If this story moved you like this video, comment below. Should people who make false emergency calls based on race face criminal charges, Or does that go too far? And subscribe to Soulful Stories 4, where we share the stories that challenge comfort, confront bias, and celebrate courage. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive in a courtroom. It starts right on the front porch. And it begins the moment you say, "I live here. I always have."